The Helios 44-2 58mm lens was incredibly popular when it first came out, providing a cheap alternative to the Zeiss Biotar 58mm f2. Best known for its swirly bokeh effect, the lens is still widely regarded as a fantastic purchase for any photographer or cinematographer. A bit more expensive and a little less known lens produced by the same company is the Helios 40-2 85mm. Although it does not have the same cult following as the 58, it was so popular that Zenit began manufacturing it again. Today, I'll be comparing the two versions of the Helios 85mm. Before I go into the tests, it should be noted that there can be a lot of variation between two vintage lenses that are technically the same. The quality control is not perfect, and so my lenses may not reflect how yours fare. With that being said, let's jump into it. The Helios 85mm is known to be pretty soft on all accounts, so don't be alarmed if your corner sharpness is suffering. When comparing the center sharpness between the new and old Helios lenses, we can see that it's pretty close. Honestly, the main difference is the contrast. When compensating for that, we can see that the center sharpness is pretty much equal. The corners of both lenses are laughably soft, but in my opinion, identical. I've also included my Rokinon 85mm t1.5 as a control. To no one's surprise, it is much sharper. Once we stop down to f5.6 on all the lenses, little difference can be seen. For this sharpness test, it's a draw between the new and old Helios lenses. I'd maybe give the newer version a slight edge because of its increased contrast, but you could easily adjust for that in post. Both lenses are exactly the same when comparing how close they can focus. Surprisingly, they beat out the Rokinon 85mm by a wide margin. Lens flares. In my opinion, this is the biggest difference between the two lenses aside from the contrast. The new Helios has definitely gained additional coatings on its front element in order to reduce flaring. It does still flare a lot though, which makes sense. Many people like this quality in the swirly Helios lenses. The 58mm is especially bad for light flares. The Rokinon fares much better than either Helios lens, especially in regards to color fringing. Although it was a bit tricky to find good spots to get some swirls, I did find a few areas that seemed to produce acceptable results. To my eyes, the swirliness is identical between the Helios lenses, and we can see just how much of a difference there is compared to the Rokinon. Lastly, let's take a look at color and contrast. As we're already aware, the older Helios lens has much less contrast and gives you that soft, vintage look. It also appears to be a bit cooler than the other two lenses. Both of these aspects are very easy to correct, and it's really up to your preference. So what are the pros and cons of each lens? Well, both lenses produce beautiful results, and I don't think you can go wrong with either. Some cons of the older Helios is quality control. Since you're getting the lens used, there's not going to be a warranty, and the lens could have been mistreated. Although mine was in very good shape, the focus ring was quite stiff, and the aperture rings were not fluid. You also need to consider the fact that older lenses are more likely to have fungus issues, since they've been around longer. Another potential con is the flares. We see worse flaring in the older lens. This could be a good or bad thing, it really depends on you. And then there are the contrast differences. Due to the older lens having less contrast, it could appear to be softer. That being said, there are some benefits to the used lens. A big one for me is that it is an old, used lens. This does not affect the image quality at all, but if you're like me and enjoy vintage lenses, then chances are you also appreciate getting something that has been passed along over the years and has seen tons of use. There is a sense of community for me when I use these old lenses, and I can't help but think about all the things that this lens has probably seen. Another pro is that this lens will almost certainly be cheaper than the newer version. I paid around 500 Canadian dollars for mine, which was on the expensive side. You can get cheaper versions on eBay, however I chose to spend a bit more for one that was in better shape. In comparison, the new lens cost me $650 Canadian. I think you can't go wrong with either of these lenses. If I have to choose one, which I do, I think I'll be keeping the newer version and selling the old one. My decision wasn't based on the image quality at all, but rather the function of one lens compared to the history of the other. The new Helios is such a joy to use, super buttery smooth focus, and lovely clicking aperture rings. The used Helios is usable and in good condition for a vintage lens, but it's not perfect. If I did more photography, I think I would choose the older one, but since I mostly work in film and need very smooth focus, pulling a stiff focus ring just won't do. If I were to keep the older lens, I think I would probably open it up and re-lube the helicoid like I did with my Helios 44M. That being said, it is a little sad getting rid of something so lovely and old, but I'm sure its next owner will appreciate it much more than me. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you're trying to decide between these two lenses, or are just in the market for a new 85mm, then I hope this video has helped with your choice.